Hey, how's it going?
And
This
it
is
says,
this is Bill
yeah, it
Brock
says,
from Team Rogue, and today we are talking with Dr. Casey Onik, and we're going to be talking about some pretty cool stuff, mainly about the possibility of Neanderthals being Sasquatch or Sasquatch being a Neanderthal. And so, Casey, what are you known for, man? And what are you all about? Like, what are your credentials?
well, Bill, of course, I'm a member of Team Rogue, which I think is enough credential for anyone. But basically, I'm a biology student. I did biology at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm a physician with an interest in this kind of stuff. We've been doing it for a long time, so it's enough, right?
Yeah, man, definitely, absolutely. And so I don't know. Everybody's always told me that they would basically pay just to hear you and I hang out and talk, and like I never really understood that. But we had started talking about Neanderthals and the possibility of them being a Bigfoot, and like Karen told me that she thought our conversation was like fascinating. So I wanted to like basically do this interview with you and talk to you about what we had been talking about. Like, can or well, is it possible that Bigfoot is a Neanderthal, and why? So I guess I'll start off with, what do you think? Do you think it's possible that Sasquatch is Neanderthal?
Billy, I think it's unlikely, you know, just given, um, unless Bigfoot is like a Neanderthal. Maybe there's a person running around out there who has a higher than average, you know, proportion of Neanderthal DNA. But I don't think that Bigfoot could be a pure Neanderthal. You know,
Well, I then for me, like, what is it? You know what I mean? Like, what is it in science that could be like close enough to us to be Bigfoot? Like, I'm just so confused by what it could actually be. And for years, I've always just kind of thought it had to be either a full Neanderthal or a Neanderthal hybrid. What do you think about the possibilities of it being like a hybrid between modern humans and Neanderthals?
well, I mean, modern humans are hybrids with Neanderthals. So that definitely exists. I mean, I can't remember exactly what percentage are Neanderthals, but I think it's like 2.5% of the average human DNA comes from the Neanderthal, something like that. So, I mean, could it be possible that somebody has more than that? Maybe. Maybe they would be hairier, um, or look different. There was that guy, that super hairy guy down in Florida, right, who was running around in the swamps. Um, Really big, hairy, dirty guy. I mean, it could happen
Yeah,
like
I
that.
totally agree with you. Like it could happen. It could be uh, a human Neanderthal hybrid, but um, as far as DNA is concerned, I think that that is the thing that makes the most sense to me. And um, while hunting Bigfoot and just doing all this kind of crazy stuff that I do, I've keep seeing similarities between what science says Neanderthals did and what we find out in nature or don't find in nature. Like people talk about the possibility of Neanderthals being basically eating each other. What the hell is that called? Like yeah,
Animalistic.
yeah, cannibalistic. So like that would keep them from being found if like one passes away, if like the whole tribe like ate it or used its bones and everything for something, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely hide some of the anthropological evidence. Like if they created a storehouse of bones somewhere that we hadn't found, or whatever like that, it's possible that some of the evidence could be missing. I would just have a hard time connecting any sort of just I don't know as much about Bigfoot as you, but from what I understand, it's a big phenomenon. It's like all over the United States. We see people in Ohio and Florida and out here where I live in the Four Corners and up in Maine. It's all over the place, So that makes me think that there's something deeper to it than just a human who has more than the average Neanderthal DNA.
All right, so man, you're an osteopath, and osteopaths like believe. Well, I think a lot. I shouldn't say all. I think a lot of osteopaths are like a little bit more connected to nature than I think a regular doctor is. I don't know if that's the right thing I'm trying to like convey, but you definitely are. You're definitely more connected with the earth than most doctors that I've ever known, and I don't know what you think about like vortexes and just energy. I don't know, just areas on the earth that has more energy than others. Do you think that portals exist? Dude, I've always wanted to ask you that. Do you think there's like really portals that could like send energy through, I don't know where, to somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, we've created those portals with science. They're able to transport small particles and other smaller things through these, portals.
Really? Where did you hear that?
It's online, man. Check it out. Check out, teleportation experiments. They exist. Small particles. I think they use like little. I don't know. I don't want to talk in depth about that because I don't really know, but I know it exists. If you want me to look it up real quick, I can.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've heard it exists too. Like basically NASA just released a statement saying that where like massive magnetic fields come together, it actually creates a portal that allows energy to transfer in and out of this portal. But I don't know where it's going. Like where is this energy going when it leaves this dimension and goes into another dimension? Where is that dimension? And it's just hard to conceive, but NASA has like legitimately said that this happens, like there are portals, and why couldn't there be bigger portals?
Yeah, I mean, you can create them. Like, I mean, I don't know if you could create them without science, but I know that, like, according to this article that I'm looking at, back in 2014, the Cobley Institute of Delft University, they do nanoscience or whatever, and they managed to reliably teleport quantum information between two bits of diamonds located 3 meters apart. So they're doing it, on, particles, things like, I don't know if you could, teleport a huge hairy beast, but definitely the phenomenon exists. We'll say that.
So the science is there to back up interdimensional or inner something travel. Like we don't even know if it's another dimension. We don't even know where these things are going. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say reliably anything about that.
Yeah,
still a mystery. Still a mystery, for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty cool stuff, though, man. Wouldn't it be crazy, dude, if like Bigfoot was like interdimensional and he could just like zip in and out of dimensions? Like, whoa, that would be so crazy. I don't know, man.
It would be crazy. I remember talking to you one time and you thought that it wasn't, though. I remember you used to get all angry at me because, like, when we talked about that, you're like, Bigfoot is not interdimensional. But now you're like kind of adopting it. It's pretty cool. I mean, you're opening your mind to it.
Well, there's once there's science to back something up, and it's not just like quantum physics or something. I mean, yeah, I start to like get on board. I start to be like, right, so maybe this is real. Maybe these interdimensional like portals exist. But I still have a hard time dealing with the thought of a Bigfoot, this massive 1,000-pound creature zipping through a portal, but this is happening on a smaller scale. But when you look at the whole, like everything, the world and everything, it's just a matter of perspective, So if it can happen on a small scale, it should be able to happen on a larger scale if everything's increased,
Yeah, I agree. It's not outside of the realm of possibility. It just seems pretty unlikely. But then you talk to people and they would say also Bigfoot is unlikely. So,
right.
It's kind of fun to fantasize about what Bigfoot can do.
Right. So from your point of view, man, as a doctor, medical doctor, understanding the human body, do you think that you or I could like go and live in the woods and basically just live there? And do you think that's possible for a Bigfoot to do that?
Well, I know that, in military training, a lot of those guys have to live in the woods for extended periods. I think it would be hard to just live in the woods and create no trace like Bigfoot seems to do. I certainly couldn't do that, mostly because of my lack of, outdoor skill.
Right. You can do surgery, man, but don't like start a fire with like 2 sticks or anything.
Oh, no, man. You put me on Naked and Afraid, my survival rating would be like 1.2. And the things that come up on the thing would be like, loves to take showers, hates bugs. That's the kind of stuff that would come up for me on Naked and Afraid. So I don't think I would last very long out there.
Oh my God, Casey, do you remember in your hotel when we were filming Monsters Underground? And oh my God, there were so many crazy bugs coming out of the sink, and then like the light fixtures. It was like insane. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. There were bugs falling out of my ceiling in that place. What was that place again?
It was like the Route 66 hotel or something there. And
yeah, Route 66. There, the outside of that hotel reminded me of the set for Firestarter. It had like an old fire engine, like old, really old, but kind of cheesy. But I really enjoyed that. That was one of my favorite caverns, actually.
Yeah. I really liked that Apache Death Cave too, man, to be honest about it. Like out of all of our episodes, that was the one that actually something really happened at, and that was pretty cool because everybody experienced something really creepy there, and that was definitely my favorite because something really happened in that place. So it was pretty neat.
That was definitely the realest episode.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, so I don't want to get too much off the subject, man. Back to Neanderthals. So really, we've been talking about doing this little thing for a long time, as far as like talking about Neanderthals, and a lot of it came from a book that you had read a long time ago, and I just have the worst memory. And what was that book that you had read that kind of gave you a different perspective on Neanderthals?
That's right. It was Svante Pabo had written a book. I'm not exactly coming up with the name of it offhand. It was so long ago that I read it. But it was a good book. Basically, it talked about all of his work, taking the Neanderthal genome and trying to, he basically obtained DNA from old fossils and got lots of information about Neanderthals and, their genome, especially their mitochondrial genome, which is what, transmitted through the female line. So basically, the split between humans and Neanderthals came about 500,000 years ago, which is, pretty significant. 7 million years ago, we separated from the chimps, to give you kind of a benchmark there. And it's just, just Svante was basically just doing the genome. He was, sequencing it from, in all the different regions, like in Europeans tend to have more Neanderthal DNA than Africans, and Chinese.
Isn't it
have
like
a
Asian?
higher proportion of Neanderthal DNA from Guinea.
Yeah, aren't Asians typically more Neanderthal than let's say like a European person? I think so.
I don't know about that. I know that like Chinese and New Guinea and Europe, they have a higher proportion than say like Africans or
Right.
Other people. So humans had to pass through the Middle East, to get to China and Europe. They went through South Asia. So,
right, and they collided.
Those are connected.
Yeah, and modern humans and Neanderthals basically collided around that area, and they ended up basically interbreeding. And then that's where we get our DNA from the Neanderthal when they kind of collided right in that area. And the Neanderthal was more built really for like the cold. Its body was smaller. When I say smaller, I mean in stature as far as height, and then it was bigger and thicker, so it could hold body temperature a little better. And I think they went north because of that. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Bill. I think you're right about that. From what I remember seeing, the Neanderthals were occupying like an ecological niche similar to other large carnivores at the time, like saber-toothed tiger and things like that. And they were also really territorial, just like any of those predators would be. So earlier you mentioned, carnivorous behaviors and also cannibalism. And so, those were things that we think did exist. There's a lot of, when you look at the Neanderthal DNA, there's a lot of traumatic lesions, post-traumatic degenerative changes that are noted in Neanderthal skeletons. And to assess the implications of the anatomical distribution of those lesions, they assign them to, all the different regions of the skeleton. And the resultant distributions, including and deleting injuries, included only by post-traumatic degenerations. They looked at all these different samples. And basically, the majority of the Neanderthal samples are highly significant from the normal human samples. So what they showed was a higher incidence of these high impact traumatic lesions when compared with other normal human skeletons that they found. And what they say is that basically the activity that looks most like the Neanderthal injuries are these rodeo type injuries that people get. So if you're a guy who rides bulls for a living, you get similar injuries as a Neanderthal would have gotten back in the day. So that's like, basically saying that the Neanderthal were hunting, like, can you imagine a Neanderthal jumping on the back of a woolly mammoth, stabbing it in the neck and trying to stay on there until that thing is dead. That's the same type of injury that you would get if you were like a modern rodeo person. So that was one study that they did that I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that really is interesting because I believe their diet was like 98% meat. I mean, they were just almost strictly meat eaters. And so they probably did that. They probably jumped on the back of one of these big woolly mammoths and just went nuts, like Jeremy Bates or something, like he just went crazy. And so I could see that happening, big Neanderthal Bates grabbing a hold of a woolly mammoth. That's
I mean, he would be an ideal person to have. I mean, they've shown that Neanderthals have larger bodies than modern humans, and hence they would require proportionately more calories. And that's they ate a lot of herbivores. So that's definitely the way that's going to go. They also had bigger skulls. One of those things that was released last year we were talking about was like, oh, here's this Neanderthal skull, and it had like these bigger eyes than they had originally expected. And I remember there was some artists, some representations, which were really cool, showing like giant eyes.
Right.
And I think that those eyes are pretty reasonable, because they have larger skulls, they're going to have proportionately more neural matter, and they actually had larger brains, because they need all of that for somatic maintenance and control of these giant bodies. So,
Hmm. Yeah, there's an artist that that actually did a video, and I was going to use it a long time ago when we were going to do this, but you can check him out. His name is Dreadfun on YouTube. He did an illustration of this Neanderthal. It was really cool, but its eyes were like up here basically. If you go by the Neanderthal skull, the eyes were up here and further apart. So it's interesting how high on its head its eyes actually were. And it's a strange adaptation, and I don't understand why it would adapt that way, because in nature things adapt for a purpose, and why it would end up having eyes almost on top of its skull is something I don't understand. But it did. I mean, that is a fact. That's how it was. And also, man,
Yeah.
when Dreadfun drew this, he drew it more like a an ape type creature, you know, where you see a lot of Neanderthals drawn in, they look like modern humans. Well, he took this theory and he basically drew this amazing picture of a Neanderthal with ape-like features, and it looked so much like a Sasquatch. I mean, that is exactly what people report. I mean, you know, these big giant eyes, like no neck, like I don't know. He drew this thing dead on, man. It was amazing. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the things that really made me think, you know, if Bigfoot is is real, it's probably a Neanderthal, and that's just kind of what I think. You know, there's not really enough science to back myself up one way or another, but things like what we're talking about, how like, you know, they had this different body structure in order to live in a different environment. Those things kind of like drive me, you know what I mean? Like that, those are the things that like make me wonder, like, could this have happened? Could Neanderthals still be a hybrid version of us that have evolved in parallel with us and are living in the woods still? You know, it's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting question. You know, going back to what you said in the beginning there about the eyes, I can definitely think of reasons why the eyes would be larger. You know, because these, you know, Neanderthals lived at a higher latitude, they're going to need larger eyes because there's less light up there. You know, I mean, if you think about how long the day is and stuff, and how these predators and carnivores that they kind of, you know, ecologically resemble, they hunt at night, you know, and animals are sleeping and less likely to, you know, be seeing things. So definitely that's the case. I remember seeing the skulls that he was using to base the spacing of the eyes on. And as I remember, there was kind of like more room on the Neanderthal between here and here. You know, so they had kind of a larger, like a nasal sinus area, which could also make sense, you know, given the exercise that they're predisposed to, and, you know, the need to breathe through the nose and warm the air in the northern latitudes, because that's one of the things that breathing through your nose does, is warm the air. So that makes sense to me. You know, it makes a lot of sense. But some of the stuff that people were talking about around the time didn't really make sense, like how, you know, the Neanderthals were like this cultureless, violent attackers, you know, and all they did was roam around in bands and, you know, attack the modern humans. And, you know, they came out with those bone studies that showed evidence of cannibalism on the bones. But most of those cannibalized bones were of older people or people who had died for one reason or another. So it makes me think that their cannibalism wasn't so much a systematic thing, but it was more of a, you know, let's not waste this meat since we might not make it through the winter anyway kind of deal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. I've been doing a bunch of research on mounds and stuff, and you may know who I'm talking about, Nancy Planeta. She ended up doing some research on a mound close to her house, and we found that this mound was actually in use when the first settlers came here, and they found out it was, and I'm pretty sure that I'm right on this. They found out it was used for ceremonies, and they would actually, when these natives would die, they would separate the meat from the bone, and they would end up crushing up the bone and then scattering that. And then I don't remember exactly what they said they did with the meat, but basically they would separate the two. And so that made me wonder if these Neanderthals were actually cannibals, or were they still practicing the same basic ritualistic, I don't know, were they doing the same thing in this native tribe that they found as they were doing with Neanderthals? Like, were Neanderthals skinning these things, taking the muscle tissue off, separating the two, crushing the bone, dispersing the bone? You know, it's interesting because we know that a tribe did that now.
Yeah, I mean, and Neanderthals, I don't think they get enough credit. You know, like at the end of their kind of time on Earth as a group, you know, they were doing a lot of stuff that the same, you know, anatomically normal humans were doing at the same time. They found evidence of bones and pieces of ivory, animal teeth marked with grooves, and, you know, basically they found like pieces of manganese. It's like manganese dioxide. It's basically like a black crayon, you know, it's what they used to write on the walls of the cave with. And they found those in Neanderthals. They might have been using those to color animal skins. So there's a lot of stuff that the Neanderthals did, and I think that they get kind of a bad rap as far as what they were capable of culturally. You know, I think they had kind of a you know, a sensitive culture. They were one of the first to bury their dead, you know, which is a big thing. From a psychological perspective, it's a big thing. So
because that shows some type of connection to another person, right?
Yeah, and it also shows kind of like this a thought about death. You know, when you're contemplating death, like what does death mean? You know, and this whole thing about being human, the origins of the word human, you basically mean like of the earth. You know, you're going back to the earth when you bury somebody. So kind of like it shows that they had ritualistic behavior. If they were burying people, they didn't just leave them on the ground like an animal. You know, and I guess that returning to Bigfoot, you know, maybe that's why they're not finding the Bigfoot stuff. Maybe Bigfoot is smart enough to bury his dead and not be able to be caught doing that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, if they just did what these Native Americans did, and this is a fact, if they just simply skinned the bone and ground the bone whenever someone passed away, which is what some Native Americans did, there wouldn't be anything to find. You know, I mean, if they are tight family groups that really do this, that could be the answer.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, they wouldn't need to. But we do know that the Neanderthal did bury their dead. You know, so, but maybe there's, you know, some Native American or other Northern American cultural lineage that didn't bury their dead. Like you said, you know, at these mounds, the mounds are highly interesting archaeological phenomenon. So
yeah,
culturally,
we've been really studying the mounds for a long time, and I'm excited for this new book to come out that Ronald Murphy and I are working on, and we really get deep into really the power of these places, you know, and the fact that a lot of these places are on ley lines of the earth, and they really seem to channel a lot of energy. I didn't believe in this energy crap until I don't know, just a few years ago, and I went up to this place called Fort Ancient, and there's really a weird energy there. Like, your hairs will stand up on your arm, and like for no reason. It's just the strangest thing. And so that was the place that really made me understand that energy is real, that it's a real thing, you know. And I think these Native Americans were able to find those spots where the energy was different, and they utilized that. But I don't know, you know, what for or how. But the more I get into these places, the more I wonder about interdimensional travel, and if the natives knew about that. Like, you know, how intelligent were these people, especially even like Neanderthals? I mean, these people had I call them people. These things had a larger brain mass than we had. They were more in tune with nature than we are. Like, were they in, it's such a crazy thing to think about it, that these things were better evolved in the woods than us, you know?
Oh, definitely for that, you know. But then they were culturally advanced, and they found a cave bear flute in Slovenia that's been attributed to the Neanderthals, and they found other musical instruments that the Neanderthals had made. So, you know, we know that they had music, they had art, and maybe they did have special powers. You know, I always talk about that novel Clan of the Cave Bear.
Yeah.
You know, and if you've read that novel Clan of the Cave Bear, they talk about the Neanderthal having, like, it's a book written, you know, basically around that time, and it's a fascinating book. But in that book, in that series of books, it's actually a series of novels, which are a great read. The Neanderthals kind of have like this, what you call, like an emotional telepathy. And they also have the ability to remember things that happened before they were born. Almost like their memories were part of their DNA, something like that, you know, which is pretty fascinating to think about. You could be born with like a memory. You would already be part of your tribe and know things that have happened hundreds of thousands of years in the past.
Well, there's experiments, Casey. Recently, you should check this out sometime. Google it sometime. There's been experiments recently where memories are transferred through DNA, but they don't know exactly what these memories are. Whether it's like how an animal comes out automatically knowing how to nurse from its mother. You know, they don't know if those are the parts of information that are getting transferred, or if it's actual memories of what needs to be remembered for that species to survive. It's crazy, man, but that's happening.
Yeah, it's tough to say whether that's like memory or instinct or how they experience that, you know. I mean, it's just fascinating phenomenon.
Well, what's the difference between memories and instincts?
I mean, memory would be something that you could think back and say, like, this happened, you know, like according to this book, you know, you would be able to look back and like 500 years in the past and remember when there was like a huge flood that killed so many Neanderthals, you know, and you'd be able to remember that like you were there. Gotcha. You know, versus like an instinct, which would be like, oh, I know how to do this activity without being taught. You know, that would kind of be the difference, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, but whatever it is, you know, these thoughts, these memories, these instincts are being transferred, and it's actually being done through DNA, and it's a trip. You know, it's like, what do we know from our past generations? Was there anything that was passed on by my mom and dad, and was, you know, like, man, it's so crazy to think that we're getting smarter just through our DNA. And hopefully, you know, maybe that's the whole thing with like selective breeding, you know, like if you created like a whole generation of badasses, they're going to be badass at the end, you know, and that's kind of what Bigfoot is, right? He's been like, right. He's had like a generation after generation after generation of living in the woods. So this thing is going to be amazing, amazing in the woods. And if that is what Neanderthals are, I don't know, man. It's finally an answer to the age-old question of what is Bigfoot? Well, it's a Neanderthal human hybrid. That's what I think it is. But I don't know. What's your thought? You think that's the deal, or do you think it could be something else?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I love talking to you guys. I love hearing about all the different theories. Definitely entertaining to me. You know, I don't have any strong feelings about whether Bigfoot exists or what Bigfoot might be. But I love talking to you about, you know, when science kind of intersects with some of these theories. I love talking about it. Right. You know, like take for instance those those drawings that that guy did. And I remember looking at it and saying, like, man, that looks like kind of like a gorilla with really big eyes, a little more intelligent gorilla. But I know, like, based on my knowledge of the Neanderthal genome, that the Neanderthals didn't look like that, because they share some of the genes that have to do with the encoding of skin and hair proteins with modern humans.
But is it the same ones, Casey? Is it the same ones that make us not so hairy? Because we still have hair all over our bodies. So are you saying that you, in your research, that you found that like Neanderthals were not extremely hairy?
I don't know. I mean, according to the research that I did, Neanderthals share the genome for skin, hair, and nails with modern humans. So they didn't look from the outside. They shouldn't have looked, based on their skin and hair, they shouldn't have looked very much different. Their bone structure is certainly different. But I wouldn't expect them to have that like hair on their cheeks or that thick simian skin,
right,
that you would expect on a gorilla.
That's interesting. So yeah, so it probably had skin like us, but it could be dark skin. It doesn't have to be like a European light skin.
No, it doesn't have to be European light skin. No, but it doesn't have a gorilla nose, right?
Right. So it wouldn't be like a flat, like hooded nose or anything. You're saying?
I don't think so. I can't say for 100% sure.
Right.
It's based just on my reading about what genes we share. Because there is that 2.5% or whatever, plus or minus. So I was interested in which ones we do share, and skin and hair was some of the stuff that we did share with them. So.
That's pretty cool. So
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, man, I just can't imagine running into a random Neanderthal. Oh, dude, so like check this out. So recently, like I've been like asked to join DEMI. It's Down East Emergency Medical something. I can't think of the last word, the I. But anyway, I'm gonna be running the drones for him, right? So like I'm gonna be volunteering my time to like fly the drone around. And so anyway, I'm talking to this director of DEMI, and I'm like, have you guys ever had anything like weird go on? Like, have you guys ever spotted anything with your cameras? Because dude, they take these like aircrafts and they fly like gigantic search patterns over massive amounts of land up here in Maine. And so he told me that when they do that, they consistently find what seems to be camps, right? So like over the whole state of Maine, this is nuts. Over the whole state of Maine, consistently, they found these camps that look like either this is his words. Now he told me this. He said either a highly trained militia type unit or something else. Dude didn't say Sasquatch, he didn't say Bigfoot's living out in northern Maine, but he did say that like something is out there and something is making camps for the night, and it is intelligent enough to go in and like cover its tracks. He said that they basically find these places thinking that like a lost person had been there. They'll send people in on foot to like check these places out. And when they get there, they find these camps, man, that somebody has like slept in. Like it's definitely a camp. But it has been all like perfectly like regrouped, reshaped, and they're able to find out these camps are there by overlaying images to look for different, anomalies, if you will, in the landscape. It's really cool, man. So up here in Maine, there could possibly be a Neanderthal hybrid Sasquatch living out in the woods,
Oh, that's funny. I like that. Or militia. It's just a militia exercise.
Yeah, but that's
They're
even
just
more
sitting
scary
there.
than Sasquatch. I'd rather have Bigfoot living out there, man, than like some trained militia living out in the middle of the
Right.
woods. You know, I'd much
Right.
rather have
That would
Bigfoot.
be cool.
Yeah,
That would be the kind of thing where you'd be like, go to that site and look for hairs, stuff like that. You know, that'd be the kind of thing you wouldn't be able to clean everything up from. You know, Bigfoot's a hairy beast, right?
yeah, that's
Then
true. I never really thought about that.
Maybe if you find one of those, then you can look for some hairs and see
Yeah, that's a really
buried
good
hairs,
idea.
whatever.
I was more
Because
thinking,
the process of like turning one of those camps over, you know, you have to like turn the dirt over too, and I don't think they would be able to turn the dirt over and get rid of all the camp and the evidence of their being there and not lose some hair in the process. Maybe you could do some digging.
huh.
You know?
But yeah, that's a great idea, Casey. Like, honestly, I never really thought of that. I was just like so amazed at the fact that this guy who's been doing this for 20 some years is like, there is something up there. That was as far as my brain could go. I'm just like, holy crap, you know, somebody who is a professional that takes aerial video and is good at what they do. They search for people. They look for missing or you know, passed away people out in the middle of the woods. These people are good. And if they can say that there is something living in the woods of Maine that is intelligent enough to cover its own tracks and make sure that nobody can find it, that's creepy, man. Like, really.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. So that was one of the more interesting things that's happened to me lately, and I'm definitely going to follow that and see what this guy has to say about it. You know, it's kind of exciting because, you know, like, I want science, man. You know, like, I want DNA. I want, like, I still want the same things I really wanted on Monsters Underground. I want DNA, man. I want like a holotype. I want like a Bigfoot in my backyard so I can like go pick DNA whenever I need to. Like, hey, dude, you know, I need some hair, man. Do you mind? You know?
Oh yeah, you could be up on stage with Dante Pablo, you know, talking about the DNA that you got. Now you sequenced 100% of the genome, whereas he only had 95, and it took him 20 years to get it.
Right? And I got this one out back, man.
Right?
Been drinking beers all day. But
I love it.
right.
I love it.
All right. Well, I'm gonna conclude this interview podcast thing, and yeah, I really appreciate taking time, Casey, to like hang out with me and talk about just the possibilities out there of, you know, Sasquatch being a Neanderthal or whatever. And it's just always fun to have you around, man. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, man. Call me anytime. You know, we'll do it again. It took us a long time to get this one together, but I'm sure something new comes up, we'll be able to get it done a little quicker.
Yeah, definitely. And if I ever have any real DNA, man, I'll send it your way, and we'll find Bigfoot. You know, we'll actually sequence that DNA.
Remember not to collect your DNA in a plastic bag.
Yeah,
we
right.
learned that one the hard way.
Yeah, true, absolutely. Yeah, I know the rules now. But cool, man. Well, have a good night, Casey. Again, I appreciate you hanging out, buddy.
Yeah, man. Take it easy.
Take it easy, everybody. See you next time.